From deep inside the Death Star, I'm Larry Larson.
And I'm Andrew Richards.
And welcome to Defrag Tools. And today we're going to look at what tool?
The granddaddy of them all, Process Explorer.
That's a big one.
It is a big one.
Awesome. So let's dig in.
Yep, so Process Explorer is a systemterminals tool. We went through this last week. We went to systemterminals.com and downloaded the entire suite. Just a quick repeat of that. Whoops. Systemterminals, it comes up as #1 hit. It is the most popular tool by far as systemterminals, like 10-to-1 ratio of everything else. We got the whole suite down, and one of the things we downloaded was Process Explorer, wherever it is. Process Explorer is a replacement for Task Manager. And you go, well, why do you need to replace Task Manager? And there's just details that we don't want the common person to have.
It's kind of overkill for the typical person.
Yeah, like if you're watching this show, you are in the uber elite, and this is the show. This is the tool you need. You know, Task Manager is just a little bit too simple. So we're going to go over Process Explorer. I described this the other day, how I've downloaded it and put it on my path, so simply I can just run it.
Nice.
Why do we have this EULA and user license agreement? Well, systemterminals used to be public, and back in 2004, it was acquired by Microsoft, and as always, the Microsoft lawyers got involved, and they asked this.
What have they done?
All they've done is all the tools require a end user license agreement. What you can do if you are doing a bit more automation is there's a command line switch, accept EULA, and that way it will bypass the screen and do that. It is a per user setting, so if you're running this as another user, you'll have to go through it again. So it goes into the HKey current users file. Now, one of the things I'm going to do in this series is I'm going to show you under the hood what's happening. So you're a bit more aware of what the tool's doing to your environment.
That is the defrag part.
And that is the defrag part. And so in this case, you get under HKey current user, software, and then systemterminals. And then for each tool, as we go through them, you'll end up with a key. So you'll end up with a key for Process Explorer, Process Monitor, Proc Dump, Auto Runs, the whole lot. And as you can see, there's the key right there and where it was, where it ran from.
And if you clicked accept, it'd add the same key?
Exactly the same thing. Yeah. So let's bring the two of them up against each other and do an immediate compare. Here's a tip for the day. Press Control and plus and auto sizes columns.
Nice.
I love that tip. So as you can see, by default, you're not really seeing all the processes in Task Manager. You actually have to elevate to see them all. Process Explorer lets you see them, but if you try to, where's an example, like error opening process, you can see on the tooltip.
And what's the difference between the colors?
All right, so the colors are mapping what you own as yourself, what runs as a system, what's a .NET process, what's a job, what's an immersive app, all these things, and we'll go through this in detail. My general tip is collapse the services key. Unless you're worrying about NT services, you don't really need to see them. Right here next to the process, you'll get the CPU time. This will actually be the current CPU time. There's actually a new column that was released only about 2 or 3 months ago where you can actually see the aggregate of the ones underneath it. And so you can see the tree CPU usage. And so that's one of the very first things I do is I add that column and put it right next to it and then kind of shrink it up. And that way I know that, okay, there is some in there, but it's, and everything else is one-to-one, of course. So looking at the two, you go, well, Task Manager over here has 0 down the whole lot except for Task Manager itself.
Yeah.
And that's because I was just moving the mouse over it. Yeah, over here you're seeing a huge amount of activity.
Yeah.
So one of the things that's available on Windows 7 and maybe Vista versus older OSs is you actually can get the actual CPU cycles per process. And so Task Manager takes a how many times you will schedule time point of view. Process Explorer actually goes and work out how many actual cycles in the CPU. So there's a gigahertz, so it's 2 gigahertz, so it's like 2 billion cycles per second.
Yeah.
And it's actually counting those up and proportionally working them out. It also takes account speed stepping. So it knows that if the CPU slows down on a laptop, it adjusts for that.
And which operating systems will this work with?
All right, so Explorer, all the System Internals tools in general work all the way down to XP Service Pack 3, which is the latest service pack for XP, and correlating to that 2003. It's available, they're all available on 64-bit and 32-bit. Process Explorer is, from memory, the only tool that's actually available for Itanium. So you can use it on Itanium, IA64 systems.
And do you have to use the 32-bit over the 64-bit? Should you just use the 64-bit if you're on a 64-bit system?
The System Internal tools are very clever that way. So this is the program I ran. I ran Process Explorer, yet there's a process underneath it called Proc Explorer 64.
Yeah.
And a lot of tools fall into this same design: Process Explorer, Process Monitor, Proc Dump, various others. And what happens is you can't run a 64-bit process on a 32-bit app. It just goes, I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And so Process Explorer is shipped as a 32-bit application. And you go, well, I never copied 64 to XE somewhere. Well, where did it come from? It was actually inside the 32-bit process. What it does is when Mark compiles Process Explorer, he actually compiles the 64-bit one as a resource inside the 32-bit one. And then in 32-bit one, he goes, oh, this is a 64-bit OS. It would be better if I ran the native one because you get more abilities from the OS. He pulls the XE out of itself, out of the 32-bit XE, puts it on the disk, tries to put it in the current directory. If that fails, he then puts it into temp and runs it from there. And then the first one just becomes a waiter of the second one.
Nice.
And so the 64-bit version can do that. There is some limitations in the OS about bitness and like when you run 32-bit processors on 64-bit and how much you can interrogate them, and I'll show you that quickly today. So at the moment, these are both running as standard user. In Task Manager, you would click the button and you would elevate, and then you would see more. Same thing goes with Process Explorer. You can do show details for all users. And it will relaunch. Oops. It will relaunch now, showing everything. And so if I hover over that one I couldn't see before, you'll now see that you can look at the path.
Nice.
All right, so other things that are kind of interesting is the way that Process Explorer shows system usage. And so one of the things that you'll see is that there's interrupts. So interrupts is when hardware says, by the way, Mr. OS, I need to tell you something, whether it be a network packet or a mouse move or something. That time is not journaled in Task Manager at all, so you don't see it. So you could have what we call an interrupt storm, which is when a piece of hardware goes flaky using 100% CPU power, and you would never even see it.
Yeah.
Your mouse would be going.
Yeah.
And you go, what the hell? I mean, there's nothing there to look at. This graph is kind of replicated in these graphs up top. These graphs up are always available here, and also there's a notification icon, and this is the same thing again. So you can leave it minimized and kind of like get an idea of what the system's doing, much like you can with Task Manager. Right, so if we open up this guy, because the amount of information that Mark had to show was just getting too much, this used to be exactly the same panel.
Yeah.
We split it out into tabs. And so the summary one kind of gives you the same amount of information, a bit more. You notice it's all white. This is the new Windows 8 style. You can actually configure that. And so we have CPU usage over time and system commit and physical memory. And those two things are quite different to the way that this is represented in Task Manager. Windows 8's Task Manager does show this. It actually copied, or not copied, but uses the same kind of methodology that Process Explorer does, so it's kind of evolved into a bit more accurate.
And process memory, that's pretty self-explanatory, but what's system commit mean?
All right, so a box has memory that can be used, and there is two ways of generating memory on a box. There's actually having memory, physical memory, and let's say that you've got 2 gig of RAM, then you'd have 2 gig of physical memory. You may lose some of that because of PCI addressing, which is what the GPU steals some memory space because it needs it. Major problem you used to get on x86, not so on 64. And then there's the memory that the page file can give you. So let's say you have a one-to-one relationship, which you should, because otherwise you can't fit a dump file, like a bug check, blue screen of death file into the page file, which is where it goes.
Yeah.
You want to have at least one-to-one. Okay, it gets hard when you have like a terabyte of RAM.
Yeah.
Different story, but in general, you should have one-to-one. So if you've got say 2 gig of RAM and you would have a 2 gig page file, that gives you 4 gig, which means you have 4 gig of commit, which means the system can remember up to 4 gig. Okay, your memory may be in the page file at some times, it may be in the memory at the same times, but collectively it's 4 gig.
Yeah.
And so the actual per CPU, the per process memory has to be carved out of that. And so if my program asks for a gig and you ask for a gig, then you've used 2 out of the 4 gig. The OS has got another 500 meg or something, and then once it's used up, it's used up. And then you get that little low memory bubble.
Yeah.
So, all right. So, quick summary of what you see. I mean, my box is, as we've seen on Defrag and Defrag tools before, is quite quiet. You can just see I/O and network stuff like that. If you hover over anything, you can find out what process it was. So this was an SVC host that did that. If I open up a new IE, we'll see a temporary blip. You expect, so you can see the I/O to the disk, and then the I/O on the network, and I/O. So general I/O is all I/O built up, then split out into network and disk. A bit more physical memory got used, and then at this point, like Process Explorer, you're still using the most amount of CPU power. So, kind of useful tool just to go back into time and go, you know what, my machine was running a bit slow 5 minutes ago, or finally got it back. Well, what was that? And you just run back in time. Process Explorer has to be running. So one of the things that is suggested for people who are power users is just run it always. Yeah. And the way that you do that is you just put it into your in some startup group, and Proc Explorer, and then what you want is the command line /E, which is run it elevated, because quite frankly, if you're a power user, you may as well just have it showing everything. Mm-hmm. And /T says put it down into the tray, into the notification area, so it comes down just purely down to the bottom here.
So tell me a little bit about the implications of running that all the time. Is it logging? Is it going to create massive logs?
Yeah, it will remember as much as your screen can hold. So if you have an ultra-wide screen, it will buffer that much. And then as it hits the end of the screen, it will say, well, there's no way I can visualize that anymore. Then it starts throwing it away. Yeah. So yes, there is a little bit of memory. As you can see at the moment, this thing's using...
And so you were talking about it moves off the left side of the screen as the graph.
Yeah, it's like Task Manager. Just you
so what's going off the left is actually disappearing.
Yeah, and so you're seeing it, the width of all the CPU. So currently, if you look at the Task Manager way of doing it, you're only seeing a small slice, but the width is equivalent of the entire, if you show it that way. So. So CPU-wise, as you can see, it's not much. This CPU is actually a little bit higher because I'm actually viewing it, but if I actually minimize this and didn't actually have the refresh on the screen, it would go close to 0. Memory-wise, 19 meg. Yeah. Irrelevant, really. So yeah, it's completely non-invasive, really. You can consider it to be a safe tool. It's not causing any slowness on really anything production-wise. I mean, this tool is used hundreds of times per day in support calls at Microsoft. Absolutely rock solid and safe. So under the covers, you ask, well, how does it get the data then, right? So it actually installs a device driver. So to run it and scrape the appropriate information, it has to install a device driver in the kernel, which means you have to have load driver right. That device driver is actually also inside the exe. It's Process Explorer certain number.sys. It also gets pulled out. It gets installed as a driver, as a memory driver actually, and then actually gets deleted off the hard drive straight away. So next time you reboot, it's completely just gone. Yeah. Because it's a device driver that doesn't have any file backing it, you actually can't unload it. So if you get version 2 of Process Explorer, and then you want to upgrade to version 3, you will have to reboot to do that. A lot of the versions are backwards compatible, so it will say, yeah, fine, I'll just use the old driver for now, and next time around I'll use the new one. But if it isn't compatible, it will say the nice little dialogue saying, sorry, the driver's too old, please reboot. And most of the tools in system terminals are like that you'll have to do a reboot to get the new device driver under it. So in general, reboot when you get a new version. Yeah. So, all right, so let's kind of go through the UI and what it's like. You'll notice that now my parent's gone. Remember how I did elevated? Yeah. So because I relaunched this elevated, the original Process Explorer was holding the new exe, and then the new exe made the new Process Explorer, the elevated one. Well, the original one was not needed anymore, so it closed. And then the original ProcExp said, well, that process is gone, I'm not there anymore, so it disappears. Yeah. And so this guy's parent is gone, and so well, why does the parenting matter? So this tree is based on who made who. right? And so you'll notice that Explorer as well is also hasn't got a parent here. And what happened is WinLogon, which is the process that does the control.del screen, has made a program called user.init.exe, which is the person who loads your profile and all that stuff. And then he made the shell based on the shell key. And for most people, that's Explorer.exe. If it's a kiosk application, it could be something else, like you would get in a mall or something. And then Explorer made procx, which we saw, and then it made 64, and then that made the new one, and then it lost its parent, and then we got back to the top again. There's nothing wrong about having its parent gone.
I always hate to lose a parent.
I know. There is still remnants of the parent around, and you can see that here. It said it doesn't exist anymore, but you still have its old number.
Yeah.
It's a process ID, it's PID. So that's the tree view, and it's not. It's a very good tool to just have services collapse and just see what's kind of going on and going, wow, what is that process? I didn't really know why it exists. And once you do that, you can then start using a program called auto runs, and also a new feature that was released only a couple of weeks ago where there's a new setting here called auto start location. And you can say, well, how did that process get started? And if the process matches up with a known auto start location, it will put it there. So the odds are those things will launch from there. It doesn't mean that it was, it just means that it could have been, right? But I know that I just booted this. I just rebooted it, and I didn't run anything before we started taping. So the odds are, yes, that's where these came from. And then you can right-click and go jump to, if you double-click on it, and where is it? Yeah, Explorer. And then that will bring us to the registry place where that was, or the file system. Cool. All right, so if you don't like the tree in tree view, what we can do, I'm just going to set up a demo in the future. So I want to find that command prompt. So if I did it in a tree way, and there was a C above it, then I have to kind of like toggle down.
Yeah.
If you sort it, you can sort it by name, much like you can Taskmanager, so you can get an easier find. And the other way you can do it is any Windows application. You see this little, what do we call this?
Like a target.
Yeah, bullseye type thing. You can drop it on the process and it will highlight it. Actually, I'll choose something else before I do it. And then it will set focus it. So you know how you get that sometimes that annoying dialog box and you go,
yeah,
unknown error occurred?
Yeah.
From what?
Yeah.
Right? That's how you find out what it was. Particularly when you've got things like multiple Internet Explorers or stuff like that. So it's a good way of finding out which one it is. So the tree view is kind of cool and gives you a really good way of navigating and a better way of understanding what's going on.
So talk a little bit about the parent-child relationship with Internet Explorer.
All right, so that's a really good question, because why do we have multiple Internet Explorers, right? Yeah. It's kind of like, well, I only need to browse one web page, and if I actually get rid of the second, so I only have one IE left, I still have a few of them hanging around. And it's all to do with security. So there's a new column that was added with Windows Vista called Integrity Level. Yeah, you know what you're talking about. And we move that over here. And so you can see what level things are running at. We don't want web pages to have, carte blanche control of anything, really. Yeah. And so what happens is, when you launch a program, it's always going to copy the process it came from. Explorer runs at medium, you can see here, and so it made a medium process, unless you explicitly say, make it lower. And so Explorer then makes new copies of itself, and each Explorer runs a tab, and it makes it as low. So if you do things like, I want to save a file into c:// all right, t.text. Yeah. It goes, I don't think so. And it actually will redirect it into your profile, into what's called a virtualized area. And this is actually what some of UAC was. UAC was not only just asking for that dialog popping up, but it's also saying, if you ask for this folder, you're actually going to get this fake copy over here, and you'll never know it. Yeah. And if you just read and write to what you think is c:// you will never know. Yet you've been virtualized off into the safe sandbox. So Internet Explorer in low mode has that. It has a a low integrity mode download area. So all your temporary internet files and those JavaScript files and stuff are all going into this safe location. So that's one of the comms you can add. Kind of associated with that is a thing called ASLR, which is also added in Vista. ASLR is address space layout randomization. So the way that viruses used to work is they knew that if I go wherever I am plus 423 bytes, I know that I'm going to be in this other function, right? And then I know that that differential can be hacked, and then we can do our things. What ASLR does is every time you load a process, it moves everything around. And as the versions of Windows have got higher and higher, we've had more and more randomization. And Windows 8's, I think, up to 256 or something or higher randomizations. So that's a good indication of what is a safe process these days. It really can't be hacked. So there's a couple here from whatever these are which don't have it. So I go, well, if I'm worried about security risk, I would want to make sure that those things are patched because they're not as inherently safe. So while we're going through columns, let's go through some of these. So username is who owns the process. A bit more useful for things like terminal servers and stuff like that. Verified signer. So most software these days has digital certificates, and so you can turn this on and say verify. So let's get rid of the auto start because it's kind of stealing a lot of space. And so, did I see? And so you can see who has digitally signed that. Yeah. All right. Once again, if it hasn't got a verified signer on it, you go, well, okay, this has got no SLR on it and no digital certificate. And it's like that's prime for an attack vector. So, what else do we have? I mean, there's lots and lots here. Well, I'll kind of show some of the more important ones. Version number comes from the file. Image path, where it is in the hard drive. Image type, whether it was 64-bit or 32-bit in the first place. The Windows title, so like, at the moment this would be Process Explorer, blah, 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 up the top. Windows status, whether it's minimized, maximized, all that type of stuff. What session it's in, like a terminal server session thing. What the command line was, that was kind of cool. So sometimes you want to go, how did that process start? What's the switches? The comment, you can type a manual comment into a process and annotate saying, okay, I've checked it, I've checked it, I've checked it, I've checked it. If you want to annotate.
So keep that just for that state?
Yeah, just a session. Yeah. So it's like if I click on this, I can then type in the comment section right here, going. And then you can annotate it. Kind of useful if you're like a security researcher or something. We go, but especially when presses are being made and destroyed. If you're trying to work out what is on this image, how did how did my mum's laptop get this bad?
Or if you see a bunch of SVC hosts, you can go through and start labeling them as you determine whether they're a problem or not.
And then whether it's virtualized, which is whether it's virtualized or not. Performance, this is stuff that you'll get in performance monitor type stuff. Just give me the CPU usage, what time it started, how many CPU cycles exactly it's used, how many handles it's got, that's a useful one. The priority that's running at, so like Task Manager and Process Explorer run at a high priority so they refresh the screen better. Context switches is how many times it's been scheduled in the last 1 second. I/O and how many bytes are going reading, writing. Other is operations which are like, tell me about fundamental metadata rather than a read or write of a data file. Like how long is the file, and stuff like that. And then with Vista and higher, there's now prioritization on I/O as well. So processes used to have a priority. So this program is meant to run more often than this guy. In Vista and higher, you can also say, I only want priority. No, I want this priority to be higher. Like media player is a good example. Make sure that the I/O for media player is done at a high priority because otherwise I'm going to get glitches.
Yeah, you don't want to have stuttering videos.
Yeah. One of the great things that was released about maybe a year ago is GPU usage. So if you want to see if your GPU is pegged during a game, this is the tool. You just start Process Explorer before you start the game. Or
if you want to see if the video you're rendering is using the GPU in addition to the CPU.
Yeah, and also the other thing goes with that is how much memory it's using. Right? I've got a 1 gig card. Is it actually using all 1 gig on the card, or am I only using 300 meg? Right, and then you can make decisions about that. Handles. Handles is when a process wants to open up a file, you say, I want to open up c:\defrag tools.txt, right? And then the operating system goes, here's a handle, which is just a number.
Yeah.
It's it's a number. And then from that point on, you say, I want to read from file 12. I want to read from file 453. So it tells you what the handle value is. The access mask tells you what rights you have on that handle. So it might be, I only have rights to do read, but not write. Whether it's sharing or not. So when you get, another file has access to this file, sorry, you can't delete it. Well, this will show you that some other person took out exclusive share on that file. And then object address is where it is in the kernel, which is more of an advanced debugging thing. DLL information. So obviously this is very exe focused, so you can find out about the DLLs within it and how much memory DLLs are taking up in a process. So you might have a little shell of an exe, but loads a behemoth of a DLL. .NET. So you can find out statistics with .NET. How much memory is in Gen 0, Gen 1, Gen 2, how much CPU time the garbage collection is taking, and what type of stuff. Very useful for just working out whether there is or isn't a leak in a .NET program. But especially when you have an interop one where there's lots of native and managed code, well, the native will go into a heap and then the managed will go into the garbage collected heaps. And then the status bar is this thing down the bottom. You can choose what you want to see at the bottom when it scrolls. So lots and lots of columns, lots of detail. One of the things, this has to be brief because of what we're doing today, but the book has, it's like a 30, 40, 50 page chapter on Process Explorer. It goes through every single column, what it means, why you want it, and all that stuff. So, $20 from Amazon, just go buy it. It's not even a question, just go buy it. All right, so we're going to quickly run through all the menus, try to keep it quick, and then we'll get out of here. Much like Task Manager, you can log off, shut down, restart your machine. You can run a process, much like you can with Task Manager. Options. So always on top means that it's always the topmost window.
Yeah.
These top three here are what are most common. So if you press Control-Shift-Escape, it'll bring up Task Manager. And if I click Replace Task Manager, what happens is there's a system in, there's a part of Windows called IFEO, Image File Execution Options, and that's a big, long set of words. And I always forget whether it's in Windows or Windows NT. But I'm going to give it. Which one do you want to try? Is it Windows or Windows NT key?
NT.
You can go for the NT key?
I'll go with NT.
I was going to go with that too, so we both can. Oh,
nice.
Rock stars. And so here's Task Manager. So when you run Control-Shift-Escape or run Task Manager, this is the program. Every program that you run is checked in this key, and it goes, if there is a key of the same name, then this applies. And what there is in here is system.internals is just set the debugger key. And actually the command line that Process Explorer will get is blah, 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 Process Explorer space taskmanager.exe. You actually will append it on the end. Process Explorer just goes, yeah, whatever, I don't care about that command line. I know what's happening. I'm replacing Task Manager. So if I made a key in here, kind of going off kilter here, but if I make a new key here called mspaint.exe and a new string in here called debugger, and I put notepad.exe, if I run mspaint, Notepad comes up.
Nice.
Yeah, so you can really
you can really screw with people.
Well, this is and see what's happened here. So I ran notepad.exe space mspaint.exe. So Notepad just opened up the exe as a text file.
Very cool.
So if you want, you can go in there and, if it wasn't easily signed, you can just change some hex and completely stuff someone up. So yeah, if you want to screw with someone, like A causes B, don't get into a cycle because if A makes B, then B makes A.
Yeah.
I'm just going to delete that before I forget because I'm going to trick myself otherwise. So that's the magic behind Replace Task Manager. And
so now you can do Control-Shift-Escape.
Yeah, so I'll kill this guy, so it's completely gone. And now I press Control-Shift-Escape, and now I press Explorer.
Very nice.
So hardware minimize. So if I minimize that now, it goes to the taskbar. If I say hardware minimized, it will disappear as an icon there and only be in the notification trace. If you're doing that one, I highly suggest you also allow only one instance. You only need one up. At the moment, if I ran Process Explorer again, I would have a second copy. But
why would you run two of the same?
Well, maybe if you're trying to do two separate pieces of analysis or something.
Yeah.
Or, I don't know, but I've never
Yeah.
used it myself. Yeah. Confirm kill. You just make sure that if you press, close, it says, are you sure?
Yeah.
All right, verify image signatures. So this one is to do with the verified signer. It goes through and actually goes off to the cryptography CRL and works out whether something's certificate is valid still and not expired. All right, try icon. So currently we only have one down here, the little CPU graph, but you can add any of those graphs that were up the top here, which is the same as those ones in that bigger dialog. And so if you suspect that you've got some CPU or some I/O problems, just leave them down here. And you
I can add GPU, so I can watch to see how much my GPU is being used if I'm rendering a video.
And actually, it's kind of apt recently because this week we announced that we're dropping support for gadgets because there's a security flaw. So all these beautiful gadgets people have for CPU and GPU tracking, they're not considered to be safe anymore. So this is a really good alternative for that. So once you've done that, I'm going to jump to colors. Colors are all the things that you're seeing here. When a new process is made, it goes green temporarily, then back to its not whatever its color is below. Same with deleted objects, so you can see processes being created and deleted. Blue ones, or purpley color, is processes that are I made myself rather than the operating system or someone else. Like if this was a terminal server, it would be another user, wouldn't be mine. Services are NT services, so things started by SCM. Things that are suspended, so if I can right-click on a process and say suspend, and it will go grey, and then I can right-click again and go resume. Packed images. So packed images are images that Process Explorer has a whole lot of heuristics in it that try to work out whether this program is trying to hide its actual code inside itself. And if it thinks that it is packed, it will annotate it. Generally, you should say that there's never any packed images. If you see it, it's probably malware, or you should at least suspect it to be malware and do something about it. So that's kind of it. All right, relocated DLLs. So this kind of became defunct when ASLR was invented in Vista because everything's relocated now. So that's why it's not turned on anymore. But it used to be interesting because relocation suggested that something weird was going on. Jobs, once again, another thing that has been disabled. Jobs are a collection of processes, and the best example I have for that is WMI. There's multiple exes, and what they have is a quota around them all. They belong to a job, which is a collection of exes, and it says this group of people can only have this much CPU power, this much memory, and you shall not have any more than that. So that way, if a WMI query goes off kilter, it self-protects itself, particularly from a memory point of view. It says, out of memory, even though in that individual exe's address space there's plenty of memory left, collectively they make sure that they don't spike off and destroy the box. And it's better to have an out-of-memory situation to tear itself down than to let it go rampant. .NET processes, I don't think I've actually got any .NET processes running, but if it's .NET 2, 3, 4, 4, 5, it'll go yellow. And immersive, do you know what immersive is?
Not off the top of my head, no. Immersive
is the internal name for Metro.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so they're classed as immersive applications. So Metro is actually the GUI scheme, but the actual technology behind it is called an immersive app, and it's also called a modern app these days too.
Yeah.
So if you look at all the APIs, it'll say something, is an immersive process or something. So that's what that is. So if I had Windows 8, I could turn that on, and you would be able to highlight the WWA host exes will come out up in that color.
Nice.
All right, the graph background. So a lot of us are used to Process Explorer from years and years ago, and it used to have a black background. With the change in Windows 8, Task Manager now has a white background. And so if you want to be old school, and I'm an old school type of guy, you can change back to black.
Yeah.
And you can see it down here and also up top, and then obviously in the big graphs as well. So that's the colors. I'll get to symbols in a sec. Difference, highlight, duration. So this is just how long the highlight lasts for. There's nothing more to say about that. And then the font. So if you're doing a demonstration and you need a bigger font, pump it up. All right, configure symbols. So this guy is the whole point of why we ran, why we downloaded all those tools last week and made a symbol path. And did I make the symbol path? Let me just double check. So this guy's running elevated. So he's running, let me just double check. So this is the folder we made last week. And this is the symbols we made. And so we have the source path and the symbol path, and we did it at the machine level. And I was going to run that again because I don't think I ran it. And then we'll launch a Process Explorer, elevated. And then under symbols, I'm not sure why it's not picking that up. Anyway, sad thing is that, you know, in all your practicing for this, it works, and then when you go to use it on stage, it doesn't. So anyway, that should have picked it up out of the environment variable, and I'll work. I think it's something to do with elevation, but we'll work it out. All right, so this is the one that comes with the OS, the DBG help. DBG help is what can understand how to look at stacks and internal information. And if I leave just that symbol path in with the exe, you'll see that on the memory tab, see how it says no symbols? Because it doesn't know how to interrogate the operating system to find the right information. And so if I change this to the one that we factoried, we install the debugger and put it into here. This is the one that comes with the debugging tools for Windows. The debugging tools for Windows ones knows how to capture and to restore information, which is reading symbols, where the one that comes with the OS only knows how to capture, and that's why it doesn't work. So if I do that now, you can see it taking a little bit longer. Oh, I might have to restart to get it to work, but that's what you have to do.
Yeah.
All right, so once you have that done, you're able to do all the powerful stuff. System information is the same as clicking the graph. Main things is, you know, if you want this thing to be semi-transparent, that's what that one's about. All right, the lower pane. So currently we've talked about what you can see is it has an OS as a whole. In the lower pane, what you can see is all the DLLs in a particular process. So let's collapse these guys and just see who's loaded in Explorer at the moment. So this is all the DLLs inside Explorer, so you can work out what extensions are loaded, you know, context menu extensions. And the other view you can see is handles. And so this is all the things that are open. So there's handles to the desktop itself, there's handles, which is like a concept, there's handles to do some directories, some events, a lot of files. And so you can work out who owns something. So let's say that I want to I just made this directory just then. I want to delete temp. It says you can't delete it.
Yeah.
Go, oh, why? And what you can do is you can go find who has, who has Andrew temp, and command.exe has it. In this case, it's a handle of type file. And when I selected it, I don't know if you noticed it, but it chose the process on the list, and it also highlighted it in the pane down below. So this is the guy who's got this open. So there's two ways of making my dialog finally work. I can go here and go change directory down one to release it, or I can be a bit more naughty and go right here and go close handle and force it. But you're putting the program into an unknown state.
Yeah, so your command window would think you're still there.
Yeah, and it thinks it has a valid handle to it. And so when it gives that handle to a process, to some function, it goes, the office is going to go, yeah, that's not valid.
Yeah.
And then you might go down an error path that, you know, that program was never expecting to go down. I know with, so you can see that that's now gone. Let's see how it went green, because I changed directory and that's holding it.
New one.
Yeah. And so if I try again, and that's a very common one that you go, why can't I kill this file?
Yeah.
So that's a great thing. So Control F for a find, and that's what the lower pane. So Control L toggles it on and off. Control D is DLL view. Control H is handle view.
Nice.
Remember those three. Columns. We've been playing around with columns. You can actually save them as sets and have like predefined defaults, so you can do that. Yeah. Process. You can kill processes, restart them, suspend them, all that sort of stuff. You can do dumps. So you can say, well, this process is hung. Let's take a full dump or a mini dump. Mini dump is enough to work out what it was doing, but not why. A full dump is enough to work out everything by definition. So if you're a debugging person, and we're going to get to the point where we'll go into debugging and how to do that type of analysis and general way down in the list of episodes.
Yeah.
We'll get there. And so that's what that's for. find is what we used before. Who's logged on? So if there's multiple people logged on, you can play with a remote desktop session and then help them out. So that's a very quick tour of Press Explorer. I'm going to leave it up to the reader or the viewers to do the rest of it. It's still quite, we're already like 40-something minutes into this, so I want to end it. Most of the things are self-evident, like here's all the paths, and this is the processes, and this is the performance per process, and here's the graphs per process. Same thing with GPU, so you can see how much some particular person is using. These are all the threads in the process. This is what that DLL is for. If I didn't have that DLL loaded, I wouldn't have these names on the end, right? And so you would just get hexadecimal numbers across here. So it gives you a much cleaner idea of what's going on. So the command prompt is waiting for reading console input.
Nice.
So, and there's only one stack. You could see what network connections it has, what security token it is, all the environment variables are in effect, and strings pulls apart either the exe or the image to look for keywords. So if you're looking for malware that's talking to iambad.com, you could search through here to see if there's any dodgy websites. One other thing I will point out is if you hover over a service, you will get the name of the services. So if you're trying to work out which of the SVC hosts has a the plug and play service, for example.
Yeah.
There it is. And also in the square brackets is the SCM name for it. So if you're using the command line, you have to use that shorter name rather than the long name.
Yeah.
And that's about it for Press Explorer. Once again, it's a big topic. Mark Russinovich has talks called The Case of the Unexplained at TechEd. He regularly goes through this as well. So if you want a different point of view and a different way of looking at it, go watch all those off of Channel 9. And get out there and enjoy it and make it your new task manager.
Very nice. Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
Thanks for showing us this today.
Definitely.
And that's this week, so join us next time.